Hello everybody and welcome to the CEM homework review video. This is week 4, block 6, and this is lesson 8. Much like the last video, we're going to be going through some close passages, and I'm going to talk you through how to work different types out and what the answers were to these specific tasks. So you should have been doing these activities, tests 7 to 9 in your 10-minute test book, followed by puzzle 3. And it was this book here, pages 22 to 31. And much like lesson 7, you were practicing different types of close passages. So with test 7, we had a word bank test to start with. So as I've said before, we do encourage you to try to stick to the time as much as possible and work as quickly and accurately as you can. If, of course, you get stuck, please do skip it and come back to it. We always want you to try and put an answer in so that you can potentially get a mark by making an educated guess if you're not 100% sure. So with the word bank, you see you've got a choice of words at the top of the page here, and you need to choose the correct letter for each question number. Make sure that you eliminate words that you have used to help you keep track, and this will help you further down the line if, for example, you get to a later question and you've got a word that really doesn't make sense. Then you might find you've made a mistake earlier on and you can go back and check your answers more easily. Another really important thing to do is to read beyond the gap with the blank word in to get an idea of what the sentence is and what the passage is trying to tell you, what the context is. So first introduced to the UK in 2000, canicross is fast becoming an established pursuit across the country. In this outdoor sport, which originated in Northern Europe as a way to train sled dogs, runners race in something with a canine something along cross-country trails of something distances. In the past, only certain breeds such as huskies participated. Now a wide selection of breeds are involved. So just for this first section here, I know that it's telling me about a new sport containing dogs. So I've got to choose which words are going to make most sense in the context of the passage. So in this outdoor sport, which originated in Northern Europe as a way to train sled dogs, runners race in partnership with a canine companion along cross-country trails. I'm having trouble reading this morning, of varying distances. And varying means different. It varies. So if I was doing this test as I was going through, I would then eliminate those words that I have chosen. So I've used this one, I've used this one, and I've used this one. So I know I don't need to look at those when I'm doing the next set of questions. During a canicross race, each runner is attached to their dog by means of, tethered, I had to guess because I didn't have my word bank in front of me, tethered to their dog by means of a specialised harness or specialised harnesses and a bungee line. Ideally, this connecting cord is around 2 meters long when fully extended. Okay, so again, I would cross out those words that I have chosen to help me keep track of the answers in my word bank. I said connecting, didn't I? Dogs lead the way along the trail with runners using verbal commands to stay in control. Runners can set the pace by making adjustments to their own speed or leaning back in their harness to encourage the dog to slow down. The benefits of canicross for dogs are apparent. Not only does this sport provide exercise for dogs, but learning to respond to voice commands also improves obedience. Some advocates of the sport claim that dogs who participate in canicross are less likely to exhibit destructive behaviour, as regular running relieves boredom. So those of you who might be dog owners, you might know that if a dog is left on their own for too long, they get very bored and frustrated, and they might end up destroying things in your house. Not necessarily deliberately, but because they're desperate for something to do. So that's what that last sentence is saying. If they participate in this sport, they're less likely to exhibit that kind of behaviour, because they're getting regular exercise and entertainment. And number 9, J, that was advocates. That means people who think that the sport is really good. Advocates of the sport. They are talking about it in a positive way. Okay. So the next part of this test, test 7, was multiple choice. And you can see you've got 4 different options to choose. So again, you just need to read beyond the gap in the sentence to see what it's trying to tell you, and then choose which word would make most sense. So Mandy found the roller coaster exhilarating despite her fear of heights. And exhilarating, if you haven't used that one before, could be put in your word and meaning book. This is another way of saying very exciting. Each boat rocked gently in time with the undulating water. Another one perhaps for your word and meaning books. So undulating is meaning, it's a way of describing movement. So if you think about the movement of the waves in the water, or as the boat is bobbing along, that's what that's talking about. So swinging certainly wouldn't make sense in the water. Twisting, turning, not really. So undulating was your word of choice. Number 13. Those instructions are vital. That's important. So you should probably memorize them. Omit means to forget, to remove. Accomplish means you've achieved something. That doesn't make sense in the context of this sentence. Number 14. After tea, my brother and I resolved to finish our homework. So we made a promise to ourselves that we were going to finish our homework. The children continued playing until all of the prizes had been won. If you'd chosen since here, for example, the children continued playing since all of the prizes had been won, it doesn't exactly not totally make sense, but the children probably wouldn't bother playing if all the prizes had been won already. So think about what word changes the meaning of the sentence slightly. If we wanted to use before, that would only work better really if it said the children continued playing before all of the prizes were won. We'd have to use a different verb and a slightly different tense there. Number 16, you shouldn't go swimming if you've just eaten a heavy meal. Anthony's companions waited patiently for him to arrive at the party. And the water cascaded down the hill in a magnificent bubbling torrent. some lovely vocabulary here for you to be noting down. And remember, you can use a dictionary as you're doing your homework if you come across unfamiliar words. But do please remember to put them in your word and meaning books wherever you find new vocabulary. No cake is more superior than the mighty chocolate fudge cake. That's saying no cake is better, no cake is more important than the mighty chocolate fudge cake. Number 20, it wasn't my choice to go to the restaurant, but I went regardless. So regardless of the fact that I didn't want to go there, I went anyway. She preferred not to divulge her true feelings about the situation. This word here means reveal. Luckily, most of the damage to the building was superficial. That means it was light, it could be fixed easily, it didn't go too deep. Michaela knew that the lions would be rather tricky to locate. Everyone agreed that the band's performance was unmatched. So they were impressed by the band. But that would only work if we changed it to impressive. Everyone agreed that the band's performance was impressive. So unmatched means unparalleled, unrivaled, no one else was good enough. Takeshi had mischievously stashed most of Frank's toys behind the sofa. So stashed is another word for hidden. Okay, well done. We'll come back to puzzle 3. I know that comes after test 7 in the book, but we'll go through the closed passages first and then we'll look at the puzzle. So we're on test 8. Again, you've got a word bank here. So you're looking at eliminating words that you've chosen from the list, reading beyond the gap to help you make sense of the passage. I'll see if I say this right. Canon and Gigue in D major, more commonly known as Pachelbel's Canon, is the most famous work by 17th century German composer Johann Pachelbel. Rather than a misspelling of canon, as is sometimes falsely assumed, canon refers to a piece of music that includes repeated refrains. This is certainly the case with Pachelbel's Canon. First, one instrument begins to play the iconic melody before another instrument joins in with the same tune a few seconds later. Pachelbel's Canon was originally composed for violins and ground bass, but many other instruments have been used in performances of the song. After his death in 1706, a lot of Pachelbel's work, including his canon, fell into obscurity and were forgotten. Obscurity means, quite literally, it was forgotten about. It was not until 1968, when the French composer Jean-François Paillard adapted and recorded a new version of the piece, that Pachelbel's Canon became the unmistakable tune we know today. Paillard's version was also included in the 1980 film Ordinary People, which further raised its profile. I must say, I do enjoy reading these closed passages because I get to learn lots of new things that I didn't actually know before. I feel like I might look up that tune later on. So as you complete these tests, as I've said, just make sure you're crossing off the words that you've chosen to help you keep track and to help you double check for any mistakes. And again, read it back from the beginning to make sure that the words you have picked make sense in each gap. Okay, moving on to another multiple choice in this section. Choosing the correct words to complete the passage. So with test 7, they were standalone sentences. This time it's a whole passage. So again, read beyond the multiple choice words to get an idea of what the passage is describing. I walked at a steady pace up the path and stood at the door of the house at its end. I lifted the large crow-shaped knocker with the intent of alerting the house's occupants to my presence. But my hand continued to linger with the knocker in its clutches, hesitant to go through with my plan. So linger is another word for saying wait, to hold on. And hesitant, it's the same thing. You're hesitating, you're unsure whether to go through. I could not predict how Mrs. or Stephanie would react to my return after so many years, but I knew her response would not be warm. If I were her, I would throw me straight back out of the house, and with good reason. As I stared into the uncaring eyes of the metal raven in front of me, I felt my hand let go of the knocker. It hit the door with an almighty bang that caused a reverberation that shook me to my core. As the echo trailed off, I heard footsteps on the other side of the door. It opened. Before me stood a white-haired man in a dusty old jacket and suit. It was Mr. Labrador, Mrs. Austerfemi's reputable, well-respected butler. If he was surprised to see me, he didn't show it, though I doubt he even recognised me. So we've got quite a few nice words in this passage. Ostracised here, if you haven't come across that one before. To ostracise somebody means you leave them out, you shut them out and single them out to be on their own. So it's not a very nice thing to do to somebody. So that word wouldn't be the one. Acknowledged is to greet somebody. So that doesn't quite make sense. I doubt he even acknowledged me. Well, he hasn't said anything yet. So it was recognised. And this here is another way of saying, well, respected. Reliable. Certainly not traitorous. Okay, moving on to test 9. We looked at this in the last video. This is not multiple choice, partial words, where you have to fill in the missing letters to complete the words. So again, read the passage. Think about what the word is trying to say, or what the sentences are trying to say, and therefore what word comes to mind that might make sense. And again, if you're still stuck, think about word structure and look at the letters that you've already got for clues. So here we've got some consonants. We're most likely to need a couple of vowels to go into these spaces here, for example. Again, if you've got vowels, you might find you've got to put a consonant next to it so you can maybe build up the word until you start to recognise what it might be. This word here, for example, aardvarks are something that live throughout the continent of Africa. Well, I might want to say animals, but I know it can't possibly be that because the first letter is M. So I would think too, what do I know about animals and different types? Mammals. Aardvarks are mammals that live throughout the continent of Africa. So sometimes you might be able to think of what the word is. Other times you might want to try playing around with the letters and see what fits. Their name means earth pig in South Africa's Afrikaans language. The aardvark's stout body and protruding snout means it slightly resembles a pig, though its ears and tail are much longer. So stout is another way of saying kind of large and well built, and protruding means sticking out. Resembles means looks like. Aardvarks are carnivorous and nocturnal. They sleep all day in an underground burrow, then hunt for ants and termites during the night. That's what nocturnal means, somebody or something who is awake during the night. The aardvark hunts by employing its spade-like claws, which it uses to break into termite mounds. It then sticks its long tongue into the termite mound and eats the mound's inhabitants. It uses a similar method when dealing with underground ant nests. But the aardvark must be careful to mind predators of its own. Hyenas, lions, leopards and pythons all eat aardvarks. Thankfully, the aardvark has an acute sense of hearing, which warns it when a dangerous animal approaches. So acute, that means strong and heightened. It's got a really quite extraordinary sense of hearing, which will help it to escape. And the second part of test 9 was choosing the correct 3-letter word to complete the word in capital letters so that it finishes the sentence in a sensible way. So it had become clear he was winning the match after the first game. And I said in the previous video, quite a few of these options may well work with the letters that you're given to make a word, but you need to think about how it fits into the sentence. So if we chose these letters here, for example, we could make the word wanting, but it had become clear he was wanting the match after the first game doesn't make sense. We might be able to say he was wanting to win the match, but we haven't got enough words. So we have to think about what word is going to fit best in the sentence. She put the saddle on the horse and rode across the field. She didn't put the stable on the horse or the staple. It was a saddle. 16. Food had to be rationed because many basic necessities were scarce. That means hard to come by. There weren't much of them. Jane wants to compare this house with the other one before she decides to buy. Oh, and there's a slight error on here. Kieran always enjoys the thrills he gets when going to the theme park. Kieran doesn't always enjoy the throats he gets when going to the theme park, or the thrones. He certainly wouldn't enjoy getting threats when he goes to the theme park. But what he does enjoy is the thrills. Add 2 heaped teaspoons to hot water and stir. So heaped is another way of saying piled up. The race reached a climax when the 2 cars crashed on the final lap. And Ivan wanted to finish the chapter of the book he was reading. Nick asked me to whisper the secret to him during the lesson. The aliens came to Earth in their spaceship. Their grandmother said she would be landing in Austria tomorrow. And at the top of the first flight of stairs, you will find the cafe. So as I said, make sure you read the sentence and choose an appropriate word that makes sense within it. And I think, guys, you should be pretty expert at completing these types of tests now because you've done quite a lot of them for this week's homework. We like to make sure that you've got plenty of practice in all the different types of close tests because we never know what's going to come up in the exam. Okay, so finally we're just going to look at puzzle 3, which was on page 25 of your 10-minute test book. And these generally provide a little bit of light relief while still learning in a fun way. So with this one today, we had a muddled message. Each number stood for a different letter, and you had to decode the message by working out which letter each number corresponds to. And there were 3 clues to get you started. So, vegetarians don't eat meat. You should have known that word was eat, therefore you would know that number 1 was E, number 10 was A, and number 3 was T. Earth orbits around the sun. Again, hopefully you knew that word, so you could get the corresponding letters, S being 7, U being 13, and N being 16. And finally, I don't like cream or milk. So 8 was O and 4 was R. Once you had these, you should have had enough information to be able to fill in most of the letters in these sections here to then help you to complete the mystery message, which was meet me at my mysterious lair in precisely 8 hours. All sounds very exciting to me. And then the second half of the puzzle was shield words. Each of the 3-letter words here can go inside one or more of the words on the shields to make a new word. Write all of the words that can be made in the box. So this was very much like this activity here that we were doing, but in a different format. And these here are all of the words that we could make. So here, Fion, if we added ash, it becomes fashion. If we added act, it becomes faction. And this might not be a word you've heard of. So again, do make sure you write these down in your word and meaning books and refer to them in the future. Use them again. Use them in your schoolwork. You will impress your teachers with your vocabulary knowledge. So a faction is like a divide, a different type. You might organize people into teams or factions, perhaps. Okay. If we put this word here, hum, into this shield, we get exhumed, which means to bring up. We could also get exacted. If we use this shield here, we put gap, we get agape, which is another way of saying sort of mouth. Her mouth was agape, open in shock. We could put cut for acute. We could put war to make aware. So this one we've got lots of options. Followed by rashly and rarely. So lots of words to choose from there. Okay, everyone, we have come to the end, so we're going to stop there. And a big well done to everybody for working really hard throughout all of your homework and all of the live lessons. And as always, if you can do any of the You Could activities as well, it will be great practice for you. And we'll see you next time.